Dear students, today we are going to discuss about criticism and theory. This is English 6 semester 2 paper. I am going to talk about because if you see this paper in unit 1, these are the text which you can see. You must be reading also. Unit 2, Plato, Aristotle, and then Unit 3, Sidney, Shelley, Arnold. So I'm going to discuss with this Unit 3 today, and in this unit also we are going to talk about this Matthew Arnold. This is the portion I'm going to talk about. Now this you can find out online. This text is available. I'm going to give you some very significant aspect of this text. Okay, so we are going to discuss, because let us know what is there. What is this? This essay talks about. What is this? What is this? It's in word. What is this? Matthew Arnold, the study of poetry, talks about. So let's start. I will be just reading it, but out of this reading only will make very good points. So let's start. Okay. In this admirable essay, Matthew Arnold attempts two fundamental questions. What is poetry and what is its function in human society? So there are two questions we are going to discuss. What Matthew Arnold is trying to do in this admirable essay, Matthew Arnold attempts to answer fundamental questions: what is poetry and what its function in human society. Commencing with the later inquiry. Later inquiry means its use in human society. Commencing with its later inquiry, he develops the theme which is critical work, namely the paramount importance and high destiny of poetry. Everything else is changing, ephemeral, religions rise and fall. Truths embodied in poetry and alone eternal. It is breadth and finer spirit of all knowledge. This is said by Shelley. Breadth and finer spirit of poetry is the breadth and finer spirit of all knowledge. Hence, when other helps fail, the spirit of our race will find here alone is consolation and stay. To second question, no direct reply is possible. Arnold contents himself by illustrations by means of typical quotations from the great poet of all time, Homer and Dante, Milton, Shakespeare. What true poetry is. He concludes by warning the students against two common fallacies in criticism: the historical and personal estimate. Turning to English poetry, he shows that it begins with Chaucer. But Chaucer, admirable though he is, not the high seriousness which make classical poet. The 18th century are par excellence at the age of prose. The only authentic voice in were those Gray and Burns. So, why Chaucer is not called as high seriousness, because that time it was the beginning of the poetry. So, a lot of devices which we can use, literary devices are not being implied here. Maybe that could be one of the reasons. But what is that? The high seriousness and par excellence of the age of prose, the only authentic voices in were Grays and Burns. The value of poetry. So, there are two basic questions are being raised. One is, what is poetry? What are the fundamental questions that what is poetry and what is the use? So, let's talk about the value of poetry, its use of poetry. The future of poetry, says Arnold, is immense, because in poetry, where it is worthy of its high destination, our race and time goes on, will find an even surer and surer stay. He says that poetry is most lasting than any other human institutions or accomplishment. Even relation will at time or other fail, but poetry is men's immoral possession, or a perennial source of joy, comfort, and inspiration. Man will forever turn to poetry to interpret life for him, to consolidate him, to sustain him. Wordsworth described poetry the breath and finest spirit of all knowledge. I think that earlier, what did I say? Kindly excuse me. So I correct myself here. The breath and finer spirit of all knowledge is said by Wordsworth. I mentioned it as a Shelley, so kindly correct it, and I'm sorry. Poetry is superior to history, philosophy, science, even religion. Without poetry, says Arnold, our science will appear incomplete, and most of what now passes with us of religion and philosophy will be replaced by poetry. Poetry possesses the supreme power of sustaining, edifying, elevating men to highest possible degree. This is Sidney also says he is the end of the poetry. This purifying of wit, this enriching of memory, enabling of judgment, and enlarging of conceit. The final end is lead the draw us to high perfection as our degenerate souls, made worse by their clayey lodging, can be capable of. So you know what is the use of poetry? How poetry is used for the social cause. So without poetry, says Arnold, our science will appear incomplete. So if you are a science person, if you think everything must be scientific, poetry is part of it. The most of what now passes with us of religion and philosophy will be replaced by poetry. So poetry is a part of religion and philosophy also, because science is part of our life. Philosophy and religion is part of our life. Poetry possesses the supreme power of sustaining, edifying, and elevating man. So there are three things poetry is doing. What is? It possesses supreme power, that is, it's sustaining, edifying, and elevating. Please remember these points. Sustaining, it is sustaining, edifying, and elevating the human spirit. This is Sidney also says is the end of poetry. This purifying of wit, this enriching memory, enabling judgment, and enlarging of conceit. So again, there are more functions. It purify wit, it enrich memory, and enable judgment and enlarging conceit. So there are almost, it has become 6 qualities, 6 qualities, 3 here and 3 here. So there are 6 qualities of poetry. It enrich memory, enable judgment, and enlarge conceit. The final end is to lead draw us as a perfection our degenerated soul, made worse by clay lodging, can be capable of. Need of excellent poetry. Therefore, making need for its existence and refinement. Excellent poetry more than anything else. The best poetry is what we want. The best poetry will be found to have power of forming, sustaining, and delighting us. So again, forming, sustaining, and delighting us. Please remember these words. These are going to help you a lot. So even in a very short way, you can write your power to form, sustain, and delight. These are the 3 words. I again repeat here. Enabling, enriching memory, enabling judgment, and enlarging conceit. Then the next 3 points are, earlier 3 points were, it is, it has a capacity to sustain, edify, and elevate human. So 3 points are here, 3 points are here, and 3 points are here. So please remember these: forming, sustaining, and delighting. Then enriching memory, enabling judgment, and enlarging conceit. These are the 3 points again. And here also 3 points. So please remember these points. It will help you a lot. Now, and nothing else can. If then we conceive this highly of the destiny of poetry and accept it to fulfill the highest mission to which it is capable, we must send our standard of poetry high. The poetry that is capable of fulfilling such high destinies must be poetry of high order of excellence. We must accustomed ourselves to high standard and to strict judgment. We must learn to distinguish between high and low standard of poetry. Arnold says that it is not an easy task to accomplish. He says, in poetry, the distinction between excellent and inferior, sound and unsound, and only half sound, true and untrue, or only half true, is of the paramount importance. So this paragraph is again becoming very significant. What is this? It talks about that how this poetry help us. I repeat here, Arnold says that, he says that in poetry, the distinction between excellent and inferior, sound and unsound, or only half sound, true and untrue, or only half true, is paramount importance. So this point is significant. Please note it down. Okay, it is paramount important because of the high destinies of poetry. In poetry, as a criticism of life under the conditions fixed for such criticism by the laws of poetic truth, poetic beauty, the spirit of our race will find. The time goes and the other half fail. It is consolidation to stay, but the consolidation and stay will be of the power in proportion of the power of criticism, and the criticism life will be of power in proportion as the poetry conveying its excellence rather than inferior, sound than unsound, half sound, true rather than untrue. So you please remember these vocabularies, sound, half sound, true, untrue, half true. This will make your answer more authentic, and it's a very a deeper explanation. The fallacies in the judgment of poetry. Arnold says that we must guard against two popular fallacies in our judgment of poetry. These two fallacies generally lead us to overestimate the real order of excellence in poetry work. These two fallacies are the historic estimate, the personal estimate. We are frequently tempted to adopt historic estimate, the personal estimate, and to forget the real estimate. The historic estimate generally affects our judgment, and when we are dealing with the ancient poet, and personal estimates when we are dealing with the modern or contemporary poets. The historic estimates are the historic estimate affect our judgment and ancient poets and ancient work. We usually attach historic importance to an ancient poet or poem. The course of development of a nation's language, thought, and poetry is profoundly interesting. By regarding the poet's work as a stage in this course of development, we may easily bring ourselves to make it of more importance as poetry than itself. We may come to use language in quite exaggerated praise of criticism, in short, to overrate. Our real judgment is affected by the conventional and described ancient. Our critical eyes to fail, discern, and accomplish, and through a whole French critic highly say that cloud of glowing, paying round classic and missed as generous to futuristic of a literature as it is intolerable for the purpose of history. It substitutes a halo for a physiognomy. It puts a statue where there was once a man, and hiding from all of us all trace of the labor, the attempt, the weakness and failure it claimed to study, but veteran. It does not show how the things is done, imposes upon a model. It blind criticism by conventional admiration. It gives us a human persona no longer but to God seated, immovable amidst his perfect work like Jupiter on Olympus. Hardly will it be possible for the young student to believe that it did not issue ready-made for such divine hand. Matthew Arnold cautions us against this fallacious historic estimate of an ancient poet or work. We must not let our judicious estimate be affected by the glow of antiquity. There are, however, some ancient poets who possess real class character. Our discerning eye should be able to distinguish between a real gold and dross. Arnold says everything depends on the reality of a poet's classic character. If he is dubious classic, let us shift. If he is a false classic, let us explode. And if he is a real classic, his work belong to the class of the very best. Then the great thing of us is to feel and enjoy his work deeply as ever we can. We must read our classic with an open eyes and not with eyes blind with superstition. So there are many phrases he is using. What is that? if he is a real classic, if he is a what kind of classics he's talking. So false classic, half classic, these are the things. What are the things which we can find out that the the poet belongs to the real classic. Classic in the sense here is how he is using the poetic narrations, how he is using the poetic devices, thought, idea, theme, presentation, narration. All these things are Beato. So let me just read out it again. If he's a false classic, if he's a real classic, and if his work belong to the class, and then enjoy his work deeply. So there are real classic, false classic, and half classic. Then we come to the personal estimate. Equally fallacious, though not so popular and dangerous, is the personal estimate of poet as a work. A poet as a work may account to us on ground personal to ourselves. Our personal affinities, liking, and circumstances have great power to sway our estimate of this and poet's work, and to make us attach more importance to poetry than itself. It's really possessed because it is or has been importance. Matthew Arnold cautions the enthusiastic critic against this fallacious personal estimate also. The touchstone method. Now the question arises how to judge and decide order of excellence in moment poet. Arnold suggests that for a touchstone method to accomplish this difficult task, he recommends that the modern poet of the modern work should be judged by the touchstone of the ancient classic. In other words, he recommends that the comparative methods of criticism. He suggests that modern poets should be compared with the celebrated ancient classic and their degree of excellence in proportion as they bear comparison to them. Explaining his touchstone method, Arnold says that there can be no more useful help for discovering what poetry belongs to the class of truly excellence than to always in one's mind line an expression of the great mastery and apply them to touchstone. So what is this touchstone? I'll take a separate class for them and then we'll discuss. They are infallible to apply them as a touchstone and other poetry. They are a touchstone for detecting the presence absence of the high poetic quality and also degree of quality in all other poetry which may place beside them. Short passages, even single lines, will serve on turn quite sufficiently. We should take course to concrete exam Homer, Virgil, Dante, Sophocles among the ancient Greek and Roman poets, and Shakespeare and Milton among the English poets may take as a model of judging the order of excellence in a modern poet or work. If we are thoroughly penetrated by the power, we shall find that we have acquired a sense enabling us, whatever poetry may be laid before us, to feel the degree in which high poetic quality is present there. High seriousness. High seriousness, according to Aristotle, is a hallmark of great poetry. The best poetry possesses high truth and high seriousness to a preeminent degree. Arnold's ascribed high seriousness to the grand style. The grand style is constituted of two elements: excellent matter and excellent expression. Matter and manner, according to Matthew Arnold, the interpretation are independent on each other. The superior character of the truth and the seriousness in the matter and substance of the best poetry inseparable from the superiority of diction and moment making in style and manner. The two superiorities are close related and are steadfast proportion one to another. So far as high poetic truth is wanting to a poet's matter and substance, so far as we may be sure will high poetic stamp or diction movement and wanting to style and manner. In proportion as the high stamp diction and moment again is absent from the poet's style and manner, we shall find an high poetic truth and seriousness about absent of his substance and matter. So if you just see this, high seriousness means what are the hallmark of the poetry. So high seriousness means a grand style. There are two elements which is there: excellent matter and excellent expression. So grandness means, high seriousness means excellent matter and excellent expression. And the manner, according to Matthew Arnold, interpret and superior character of truth and seriousness. Okay, the best poetry is separable from the superiority of diction and movement of making its style and manner. Two superiorities are closely related and are street-force proportion to one another. So far as high poetic truth is wanting the poet's matter and substance, so far as we may show poetic stamp diction of the moment of wanting of a style and manner, in proportion as is high stamp of diction and movement. So you just remember these 2 points. What is this? Two things, two things, that is primarily to excellent matter and excellent expression. So how you are presenting excellent matter and excellent matter. This is what the main point is there. Excellent matter and excellent expression. Okay. So what this is excellent matter and excellent representation. Okay. Now, truth and seriousness are absent from this substance and matter. High seriousness therefore arises from the harmonious blending and manner of substance and expression. Whenever the words of Matthew Arnold, the noble nature poetically gifted, treated, and simplicity of with severity and seriousness, there arise the grand style. Grand style for Arnold is synonymous with the Aristotle's high seriousness and longinus sublime. So what is this high seriousness? What is high seriousness for Arnold is the grand style. And what is this grand style is, how Aristotle, the grand style is Aristotle, how Aristotle deals the Aristotle and Longinus, how do they express? So that is what their poetic style is, the high seriousness and a grand style. The English classic. Chaucer is the earliest follower of the French and Italian classic in English language. He is the father of the splendid English poetry. He is great in himself. He does not need the assistance of the historic estimate. He is great both in substance and style in his poetry. It takes a large, free and synthetic view of human life. So what is the theme? If I say, what is the theme of Chaucer? Large, free and synthetic view of human life. This is very significant, dear friend. Please see it. Large, free and synthetic view of human life. That's what Chaucer is taking. Okay. In where is the mouse? Okay. So in Chaucer's poetry, there is God's plenty. He is perpetual fountain and good sense. He is a perpetual fountain of good sense. His readers are enormous of his divine liquidness of diction, his divine fluidity of movement, his gold dew drops of speech. He is the well of English, undefiled. He is maker of an epoch and founder of the tradition, and yet and Arnold does not count him among the great classic. Chaucer's poetry, in Arnold's view, does not have the high excellent seriousness and Aristotle assigned as one of the grand virtues of grand poetry. The substance of Chaucer's poetry, says Arnold, is a view of things and criticism of life, has largeness, freedom, shrewdness, dignity, and in his high seriousness. So what Chaucer is saying, what Chaucer is writing, this is what we come to see here. These are very significant points, my dear. Please come and read this paragraph again. It will help you a lot. So there are, what is this? And yet Arnold does not count him among the great classics. Chaucer's poetry, in Arnold's view, does not have the high excellence of seriousness, and Aristotle assigned as one of the grand virtues of great poetry. The substance of Chaucer's poetry. What is this substance? You have to remember and read it again. The substance of Chaucer's poetry, says Arnold, is a view of things, and his criticism of life has larger freedom and shrewdness, but it has high seriousness. So Shakespeare and Milton. What is Shakespeare and Milton about poetry, and how does they use poetry, make poetry, write poetry, and understand poetry. So Arnold says that there cannot be two opinions that Shakespeare and Milton are two greatest English classics. Shakespeare is the king of the realm of thought as well as the poetic rhythm and style. Arnold Henry Cochin's view that Shakespeare produced the most harmonious verses which has ever sounded upon human ear since the verse of the Greek. So that is how, please remember this quote, how Henry Cochin defined Shakespeare's poetry. Read it again. I can read it for you once again. Henry Cochin's view that Shakespeare produced the most harmonious verse which has ever sounded upon the human ear since the verse of the Greek. I remember one of his poems, that is 7 Ages of Man. As a Milton, there is no need for any plea to assert that in the sure and flawless perfection of a rhythm and diction, he is as admirable as Virgil and Dante. This Arnold takes as requiring no discussion. This he takes as certain. Then Dryden and Pope. Then Arnold takes a controversial issue whether Dryden and Pope are poetical classic. Dr. Johnson puts them very high in the hierarchy of the poetical classic. Wordsworth and Coleridge deny this honor to them. We have to dispel the halo of the historic estimate in order to ascertain their real position in history of English poetry. Arnold believes that Dryden and Pope are the splendid high priests of our age of prose and reason. The poetry is the poetry of the builders of an age of prose and reason. They are master of the art of versification. Their poetry has force, vigor, and admirable splendor and accuracy. Yet their poetry does not have that indispensable stamp of high seriousness. It does not offer an adequate poetic criticism of life. It does not offer a powerful poetic application of their ideas to life. Their poetry is essentially the product of their discerning intellect, which is primarily the prerogative of the prose rather than poetry. Therefore, Arnold's verdict in Dryden and Pope is that they are not classic of the poetry; they are classics of our prose. So that's how Arnold and Dryden and Pope's poetry is there. So this whole definition is there. You can actually come and revisit it. But you have to read it actually. And the position of Gray is very singular. He had the making of poetic classic. He was deeply and widely read in Greek in poetry. Intellectually and emotionally constantly live in the company of the Greek and caught much of their poetic sensibility. But this poetic output is very scanty. He had written in a little more, he would have been among the great poetic classic in English. Nevertheless, he is a classic, though scientist and frailest of the classics in our poetry. So what is about Gray? Please come and revisit it. Then next is Burns. And finally, Arnold considered the claim of Burns as a poetic classic. Indeed, much of his poetry deals with Scotch life. In this respect, he can be put down the provincial poet. Yet there is in his poetry something beyond mere provincialism. There is in the time free, Catholic, and truly shrewd criticism of life. At moment, it displays the high seriousness of the great classic. This poetry is a time and effusion of absolute sincerity. He stands very favorable comparison with the Chaucer. Therefore, Arnold towards the judgment, not a classic, nor with the excellence, high seriousness of the great classic, nor with the verse rising in criticism of life and true virtue, but a poet with the thorough truth of substance and answering truth of the style, giving us a poetry sound and to the core. So, what is his explanation of Arnold towards Burns? So he is calling him as the provincial, okay? But what is it? Not a classic, nor with the excellent high seriousness of the great classic, nor with the verse rising to a criticism of life and the virtue of life, and then but a poet with the thorough truth of substance and answering truth of style, giving a poetry sound to the core. So this is what his understanding about Burns. So here, I can literally sum up in a very simple words that Arnold is trying to give, it's a kind of, he's giving, he's describing qualities of all the poets whom he knows. So Arnold's contemporaries, Arnold hesitant to examine and assess positions of the contemporary poets like Wordsworth, Byron, Shelley, Keats in the hierarchy of the English classic. They were so near to him in the time that he was afraid that an estimate of their poetry would inevitably take on a personal character. It is difficult for a contemporary to take a detached view without letting the personal estimates to weigh with him. Therefore, he leaves the touchstone method in hands of the readers and leaves him free to make his own assessment. So it's a kind of, Arnold is making assessment of all the poetry simply, and first of all he's defining what are the true characters, what is the poetry doing. This is the work defined, what the poetry does. There are two work assigned, and these two works are what is the use of poetry and how does it do for the humanity. Then the value of the poetry. Then he is coming to the seriousness, and there are a role assigned to the poetry, and then why this excellence is required. So there are, because in poetry the distinction in poetry, the distinction between excellent and inferior, sound and unsound, or half sound, true and untrue, or half true is of the paramount importance. So this is what very important, true, sound, unsound, true, half true, in the distinction between the excellent and inferior, sound and unsound, half sound and true and untrue and half true. So these are the significant points he is trying to give. So please remember, because this point is very significant. Come and visit it again. Then historic estimate is being given, and then we come to different poets. Okay, what his personal estimate is. Then he gives the touchstone method, and then he describes what is his high seriousness, and then English classic he describes, and finally he comes to Dryden and Pope, Gray, Burns, and then his contemporaries. So it's about his contemporaries. His contemporaries are Wordsworth, Byron, Shelley, Keats. So he doesn't give any estimate, because he says that being a contemporary, my assessment will not be neutral. So it might be considered biased. So that's why he leaves it to the reader to assess about their poetry. So I end up here, and kindly revisit this video. It's a very significant video, and you will definitely be able to get it, because even if the material which I have provided, you can write it in a small short answer, short question, and long as well. But you have to remember, these are the basic crux and most significant points of Arnold's poetry. All the best. Do share my channel. Come and visit it again and take the benefit of my hard work. Thank you so much. God bless you.